Hello there everybody, Sam's Trains here, welcome back to the railway and welcome back to another review. I hope you've got your microscopes ready because today's model is a real contender for the smallest loco in my entire collection. This year I've reviewed a couple of Rivarossi locomotives and they've all had one thing in common, and that is that the performance was absolutely fantastic. I was blown away by the performance of every Rivarossi loco that I tried this year. The last one, for instance, was the Rivarossi Big Boy, and I think considering that that was a big boy, the performance of that loco was absolutely astonishing. In fact, it outperformed many smaller and simpler locos. I don't know how they did it. As you can probably tell then, today's loco is another Rivarossi loco, and I've got my fingers crossed that this is going to perform as well as the others did. So this is today's model, and this does have a long German name, and let's be honest, if I try to pronounce that it will be offensive, so I'm going to call it a battery powered shunting tractor for now, and then you'll see the proper name of this when I show you the end of the box in just a second. But as you can see, this is a very tiny locomotive indeed, and unlike the Rustons from Hornby, this doesn't have any sort of wagon to improve its picking up or anything like that. It really is just the tractor on its own. So how is this going to perform? How is it going to handle the points and such on my track? I've no idea. We need to find that out. Right, so what does this cost? Well, on Hornby's website, this has now sold out, so I can't find a recent RRP for this. Some retailers have been selling this for as much as £95, which is quite a lot of money looking at this thing. That's quite close to the price of a Hornby Ruston, which is obviously quite a new toured loco. It seems larger than this, and of course you get a wagon with that loco as well. So it will be very interesting to see how this tractor compares with the Rustons in terms of quality and features. Having said that, I didn't pay £95 for this. Rivarossi / Hornby really had a bit of a sale on these a little while ago, and I was able to pick this up for £79.09. Still quite a lot of money though. I think I have paid less than that for a Ruston shunter before, so like I say, we'll have to compare and see what the differences are. For now though, let's get this out, let's see what this thing is like. Another Rivarossi loco, very excited that this is going to be a good runner, fingers crossed it will be. Let's get it out and let's find out. Look at the size of the box here. You know a loco is going to be small when you've seen small open wagons come in larger boxes. So somewhere nestled inside this box is possibly the smallest loco I've ever owned. Can't get a proper look at it at the moment though, of course, so we need to get this out as soon as possible. First though, let me just show you the end of the box. So we've got the product code here, which is HR2786. I can read that okay, but that is where I'm going to stop. There's the big German word underneath there. Yes, you can see why I decided not to try and pronounce that. ASF, it says, I can do that. The rest of it I'm going to leave out. And I think that is all there is to see on the box. So, for the first time, let's open this up and see what we get inside. Alright, so we've got the loco and now a few accessories have been revealed. No paperwork though, is that in the bottom? Yep, it's in the bottom. Right, so let's find out what this loco is like inside, because I can see we've got an exploded diagram here, and there it is. It shows the loco body there, which fits over the chassis, which looks like a really nice design, doesn't it? We've got both axles geared by the looks of it. Can't see any pickups though, so does this thing pick up through the axles? I'm not sure, but as a very small wheel-based loco, it's absolutely essential that this loco picks up incredibly reliably, and I'm hoping it will do. Right, that's all there is to see on there, so I think this other sheet is just going to be quite generic, and yes it is, so I won't go into any special detail on that. Right, let's then start opening up this package, and I might need to invite Rusty onto the show if I can't get this tape off. Maybe I can though. Yep, I can. Alright, opening it up, let's have a look at the accessories, which are very basic. You've just got 4 components here. These actually look like different coupling arrangements. So depending on which one of these is fitted will depend on what this Loco can couple to. So some of these look like NEM adapters. So that's quite smart, I like that. Great compatibility with different couplings, very good. I still haven't seen this thing yet though, so let's see if I can get this out and take a first look. Here we go, unwrapping. Oh wow, wow. How does this look even smaller? Gosh, it's really crammed in there, isn't it? My word. Like, I didn't think it was going to be quite that small. Right, that is insane. Absolutely crazy. It's quite heavy, you know. I'll have to put this on the scales in a second to let you know what it weighs, but it's not light. Obviously, it's not going to weigh the same as a Class 47 or anything like that, but I think for its size, it doesn't seem too bad. I'll be interested to see if it's heavier than a Hornby Ruston or something like that. I can tell you right now, though, this is going to struggle on the points. It really is because of that small wheelbase. The only saving grace I can foresee is that Hornby say this does have a flywheel. So goodness knows how big a flywheel, it can't be that big, can it? But if it does have one, then maybe if the power is lost on points, the Loco may be able to carry itself over the points and not die. That's one possible way that this Loco may get around that issue. Otherwise though, goodness knows what's going to happen. But yeah, this thing is crazy. It's absolutely crazy. It looks pretty detailed, it must be said, and we'll take a closer look at the level of detail in just a moment. But first, let's have a bit of background on these tractors, then we'll take a look at the weight and, of course, the level of detail. Over 500 of these shunting tractors were produced between 1966 and 1990 for various shunting duties. These duties would involve moving locomotives around, electric locos let's say, where there were no power lines for instance. Being battery powered, they were cheap, very low maintenance, and of course they produced no emissions, making them suitable even for indoor work at depots. These tractors would be used in Germany, mainly under the Dutch Reichsbahn, apologies for that, that's the German National Railway in case I said it wrong, but also by private industrial companies too. As far as I can tell, plenty of these shunters still exist today and they are still actively being used. So since the tractor has no wagon or anything coupled up to it, I've decided to compare it with a Ruston without its wagon coupled up. And I have to say, even though the Ruston is a little bit larger, the weights seem quite similar. I'm quite surprised that this tractor is as heavy as it is. I think the Ruston's still going to be a bit heavier maybe, but they're not that far off if I had to guess. But let's find out what they actually do weigh. So we'll start with the Ruston. Come on please scales. So the Ruston weighs 74 grams. All right. What about the tractor? Similar? I think less. Yeah, 53 grams. So quite a bit less, but then again, it is quite a bit smaller. So I don't think the weight is too bad, but why on earth does this thing cost almost £100 at full price? Well, maybe there's a lot of complexity in the level of detail. So let's go ahead and let's take a look. And you know what? Yes, the level of detail is really excellent, at least outwardly. I say that because there is no interior detail, which I have to say is really disappointing. Yeah, it's completely blank inside. And to an extent, I do get it. I mean, look at the size of this thing. The mechanism has got to go somewhere. But on the other hand, I paid £80 for this Loco, and that was on sale. And I feel like if they couldn't make this the premium model that it should have been for that price, given the size of it, then it frankly should have been cheaper. Because even at £80, the profit margin here must be pretty decent. But outwardly, it is beautifully detailed. So let's start by taking a look at the decoration. You've got the ASF and the number over here, which are nicely applied. You've got a tiny little warning sign over on the other side with a little, maybe a builder's plate. I really can't even begin to read what that says. Maybe the close-up lens will do a good enough job of showing that. You've got the door handle, which is beautifully picked out. Really, really nicely done, that is. And then, of course, you've got the chassis on the underside, which is die-cast, I believe. All this red section is made of metal, so that's great to see. And then on the ends, you've got this sort of wasp striping effect going on in the corners. Again, very nicely done. And then you've got the pads, which I assume act as buffers, which are probably separate parts actually, although they are painted black, as you can see. We've also got the black painted window frames, which are nice and precisely done too. So I think given the size of this Loco, the amount of decoration is quite impressive. In terms of finish, it's not super glossy or anything, but neither is it entirely matte. So it's a reasonably satin finish, I would say. Looks to be of a decent quality. Detail-wise, there's quite a bit going on as well. We have real metal handrails going either side of the doors. They look fantastic, very fine. The glazed windows on the ends have separately fitted and very, very fine wipers on them, as you can see. That looks great. The bonnets have little separately fitted handrails on them, as well as some decent moulded detail. I'm not even sure what these little parts would be up on the top, but they are separately fitted and very fine. And then on the ends, we've got what might be a light. The lens for this light is quite badly moulded though, that's not very good, but maybe this has working lights. I think again for the size of this, that would be very, very impressive. And then we've got the coupling piece here, which as I learned from the instructions can actually be removed, and you can exchange that with a NEM pocket, and there was a different sort of coupling provided as well. So again, for a tiny Loco, the compatibility with couplings here is fantastic. And with that, that is literally it. There is nothing more to see. So interior, disappointing. I feel like they could have put something there on that flat surface just to give it some detail, maybe some lighting, something like that, I don't know. The fact that that is blank and empty is disappointing. Otherwise though, it looks great. It's very well detailed, high quality as well, very cleanly glued together, very accurately decorated. So yeah, overall, I'm quite impressed. Is it an £80 model? Not at the moment, no. This is quite a simple, small, light model. There's no reason why it should have cost £80 or even £95. But maybe the performance and the mechanism will make me change my mind on that. And for that, let's get this down onto the track and let's find out. So there she is. Yes, I do think this is the smallest Loco I have in my collection now. Down onto the track, and you can see how tiny this thing looks. I've already filmed the first performance test, and I'll show you how that went in just a second. Next though, I want to talk about mechanism, which is just kind of so-so. The instructions were really not very useful in telling me how this thing comes apart. It just says remove dummy plug to fit DCC decoder. That's literally all the instruction we get. So it looks like they paid extra to get Sherlock Holmes to write the instructions, but they failed to mention how to actually remove the body, which is what people will really need to know how to do. So I realised that I was on my own for this. I noticed there was 4 screws on the base of the Loco, so I decided to undo those and see how we get on. This allowed the base keeper plate to come off, which gives full access to the axles, but as you can see there are no bearings fitted to the axles here. Now this is a lightweight Loco, so this isn't that important, but at £80, possibly more if you paid full price, come on, a bit of quality here would have been good to see. Pulling one of the axles out though, there is at least a round slot and not a square one, which is something, isn't it? So I had to figure out the body removal on my own, and it turns out that there are clips either side of the doors. So sliding a screwdriver behind the doors allowed the body to come off. Now at this point I started losing gears and such because the base keeper was still off. Now that the body's off, I can see that the body's not held on by those base screws, so I decided to put all of this back in place before continuing. The chassis here is a die-cast one, and it's very heavy as a result, high quality. This cab piece on the top is just friction fitted in place, so I pulled that off to reveal the large motor. They say this is a 5-pole motor in the instructions, which is great to see, but surprisingly no flywheel. Now the online listing by Hornby/Rivarossi for this clearly states that there is a flywheel, yet there is none here. So is it a case of Hornby trying to mislead again, or is it just they don't know their own products? Well, it's probably a bit of both. I often get the impression that they don't know their own products, which is obviously ridiculous but true. But on the other hand, I often catch Hornby overstating the features of their models to make them seem better than they really are, and yet they rarely ever understate the features of their models. So yeah, I don't know. It is a shame about the lack of flywheel though, because obviously a flywheel here would really help this Loco to get over the points without stopping. The fact that this doesn't have a flywheel is very obvious during performance. Anyway, you've got a 6-pin DCC socket here, and there's some space in front of that socket for your decoder, which is good. The chassis does have LEDs on it, and I'll show you those in just a second. The wheels have traditional wiper pickups on them. You can just about see one there, so it is all-wheel pickup. And then the gauge comes in at just below the standard at 14.2mm back to back, which is absolutely fine. Most models fall pretty close to that value. So the mechanism is okay. The lack of flywheel is a pity. I mean, I understand it. It's a very small Loco. They would have struggled to get a flywheel in there, but if they claim there's a flywheel in there, there should be one. Full stop. There's nothing more to say. The bearings as well, yeah, that's a pity. Everything else though seems to be well designed, and there's certainly a good quality motor in there. So with that, let me show you how that first performance test went. Right, moment of truth then. Every single Rivarossi Loco I've tried so far has been a tremendous performer. The largest Loco in my entire collection by Rivarossi, perfect performer. What about the smallest one? Surely there must have been some compromise on the performance here, given how tiny this thing is. Well, let's find out. Forwards direction, does it even work? Here goes. Yeah. Oh my gosh, it does. And it's not been running yet. And I think considering that, it's actually running really, really nicely. Also, it has working lights. Incredibly bright ones as well, like very, very bright. Now, some people don't like the bright lights. I do. You know, if they've gone to the trouble of putting lights in a Loco, you should be able to see them. I've got some that are so dim that they're unnoticeable, so these are good. Right, how's the gearing? I'm going to run past at 50% speed. Here we go. It's actually quite comical. And yes, it has just stopped on the points, as you might expect. All right, there we go. Right, we'll do some more points testing in just a second, but what's the crawl like straight out of the box? Let's find out. Ready? I'm easing it up very gently. Oh, it's incredible. Well, there we go. Rivarossi done it again. And I'll have to say it's not even cutting out away from the points. Oh, look at that. It's even better. Why are Rivarossi Locos the best crawlers in the world? They're all this good as well. The big boy, the S100, and now the tractor. That's cut out now. There we go. That's the way to cure it. All right, points test. Let's zoom in and try them again. Right, so the pickup dead zone is here and ends there. And actually, if I put the Loco on it, yeah, all wheels are off the track there. They're on plastic, so I will be very surprised if it gets over this. Let's go. 50% speed. Yeah, stops dead. And to say this has got a flywheel inside it, that stopped very, very abruptly, to the point where I'm actually wondering if it's got a flywheel in it. Whether Hornby got that right or not, I'm not sure. I guess you'll already know. You'll have seen the mechanism section. I've not done that at this point. But yeah, that stops dead immediately on the points. If this had a flywheel, you'd expect it to sort of carry itself over a little bit as the motor slows down. And then once it gets past the points, it would then have the power to start again. As it is, yeah, even at 50% speed, which is quite fast for one of these, it's stopping dead. Can I get it over if I go at full speed? And what does full speed look like? Yeah, we can if we go full speed. That is hilarious. Let me show you that properly. Here we go. That is hilarious. Why can it do that? It's so fast. Oh my word, I don't know. Anyway, yeah, it must be said this is an incredibly entertaining model. And the fact that it runs so well away from the points is marvellous, because it does. It's a great performer away from points. So, let's run this in. It's not going to be very pleasurable because it is going to keep stopping, but 50% speed, let's see how it gets on around the track. Here it goes. I love this thing. It's just so silly looking. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing really that would throw it off around this part of the track, but nothing's happening either, so that's good. Yep, no problems at all. It's remaining constant in its speed. It's not cutting out. I think to say it's just got 4 pickups on it, that is quite impressive. So, performance, yep, absolutely marvellous. Just as good as the other Rivarossi Locos, except for the issues over the points. That is part and parcel, though, of a Loco with this small wheelbase. So, very impressive. I'm going to keep this running in, and then when we come back, I'll try and couple this up to something. I don't know how much this is going to be able to haul, but we'll find out. And I'll also let you know what the tractive effort of this Loco is. So, looking pretty good so far. I'll be back with you shortly. Okay folks, that is running in complete, and do you know what, that went really well. The Loco is so reliable, and after it had done a few laps, maybe 3 or 4 laps, I noticed that it wasn't even cutting out on the points anymore. I mean, it was momentarily, but it was able to free itself up, so either the pickups are getting more reliable or it sped itself up slightly as it ran in. Obviously, if you run over the points more slowly, it's still going to cut out. Let me demonstrate that. But yeah, at 50, it's not doing that anymore. Yeah, so, you know, it's still got the issue on the points, but it did improve. That's what I want to say. Right, let's go back. The tractive effort is very low. Not much pulling power here. I was struggling really to get it to register a value at all, but it's around 0.02 newtons, which should be about 6 coaches on straight and level track, although I doubt that it would even be able to do that. That means shunting a large electric Loco around is completely out of the question. If you wanted to do that, you'd obviously have to have the big electric Loco sort of powering itself and just pretend that this was doing the donkey work. It's not powerful enough to do anything like that, unfortunately. However, to test the pulling power, I've set up 5 wagons with European style couplings. I think realistically in terms of wagons, this is the most you could possibly ask this little tractor to haul. So if it can do this up Gordon's Hill, then I will call the pulling power pretty much adequate for what this is designed for. But what is the performance like now? It was pretty good before running in. Has it changed at all now? What's 50% like? Let's start with that. Doesn't look much faster. Maybe it is a bit because it's changed its behaviour on the points now, but yeah, it seems about the same. What about the crawl then? That was really something before. What's it like now? Easing up gently. Still easing up. Starting to move, I think. Let's keep going a bit more. There we go. So maybe it's a tiny bit jerky, but how slow that is crazy. That's very impressive. And I think it was slightly better in one direction last time. Let's see if that's still true. Ooh. Try and get that sweet spot. No, I think the direction I started in was the best direction. But even that is a marvellous crawl for something so small with so few pickups. Having said that, to sort of sustain this kind of performance, you are going to have to clean the wheels and those pickups quite frequently. If you're running for more than a few minutes, probably every time you run this, you will have to clean its wheels. And I guess that's where the Hornby Ruston is slightly better than this, because they preempted that and packaged theirs with a wagon which had pickups on it, and obviously those wagons do improve the reliability massively, and they also mean that you don't have to keep constantly cleaning the pickups. But anyway, let's see how the coupling works on this. I've just left the European style coupling fitted to the Loco, although if I wanted to, I could fit an M tension lock, but I just think that would look silly. So I think this is probably the most subtle solution, isn't it? Okay, let's go couple. Okay, and obviously it's so controllable, so you can do a really gentle coupling, although it hasn't quite worked. I might have to just assist. There we go. All right, I suppose that's just the nature of these couplings, isn't it? But anyway, yeah, it's coupled, and it's sort of shots like this that show you how tiny this is. I mean, it's barely taller than the wagon here. Maybe it's even shorter, possibly. And it's a third of the length, perhaps, of the wagon it's coupled to. And yet it can shift them. It can shift 5 of them. So I'm pretty impressed by that, yeah. It seems to do more or less what it's supposed to. Right, we're going at 40 speed now, so even slower. And it is actually surviving the points pretty well. It is stopping, and I think a flywheel would make that sort of less noticeable. But yeah, while it can't manage it at the slower speeds, it's pretty good at the higher speeds. I've got the Hornby Ruston on the middle line here, and even without its wagon, you can see it's not really doing much cutting out on the points. I guess the wheelbase could be wider with this Loco, but it's certainly not struggling as much, so that's pretty cool. It's got a couple of milk tankers there. And then on the inside line, we've got the little Lilliput rail bus or something like that, tiny little thing. Mechanically, this is slightly better, I would say. I'm pretty sure this has got bearings, and it may have even had a flywheel in it as well. So these things are possible at this sort of size, although, yeah, this is a little bigger, isn't it, actually? And I believe it's also cut out. So, yeah, maybe this is not the best performer after all. Ooh, that's really not good. Hello? Anybody home? Oh, yep. You've left your caravan behind. Does look like a car towing a caravan, doesn't it? For goodness sake, that couldn't have gone any worse, could it? Right, look at that, shunting tractor blazing past there. There we go. How very strange. Alright, here we go, 5 wagons. It looks ridiculous hauling them, but it seems able to. And this is really not that much of a realistic demonstration, because in a real world situation this would be in a factory or at a depot just doing some very local work. It wouldn't be going around a main line like this, as far as I can tell. But this does show that the Loco is actually capable of hauling at least a handful of wagons with admittedly 0 issues. I mean, it's not wheel slipping, it's not cutting out, it's not struggling. I think given how primitive in some ways the mechanism is, and given how ludicrously small the Loco is, it's performing very, very impressively, to the point where, apart from the sort of points issue, I really can't fault it. It is a marvellous performer. So, all in all, it's very, very impressive. It did cost a lot, and I don't think the price really matches the product that well, but you can't deny it's a cool looking model. It is relatively feature packed in that it's got a lot of detail on it and lights, so it looks great as it runs along, and the performance is definitely good enough for this to be convincing. So if you can find one at a decent price, I think £80 is really the absolute maximum. It becomes very poor value at anything over there, but if you can find it for 80 or less, and you really fancy one of the smallest Locos in model form you will ever see, at least in HO scale, then sure, I could totally recommend this. It's a lot of fun, and it's bound to catch people's attention, isn't it? So there you go, the Rivarossi Shunting Tractor. Let's have some ratings then on the absolutely wonderful looking shunting tractor from Rivarossi. The level of detail was pretty impressive to me, actually. I mean, it's got lights, a tiny Loco like this with lights, that's no mean feat. It's also got a good number of separately fitted parts, which are very fine and realistic, and the decoration is surprisingly complex for a Loco of this size as well. It does, however, have no interior cab detail of any description, no lights, no controls, seating, nothing, which I think is a bit of a pity at such an expensive price. The performance similarly is really good. The crawl is marvellous, the speed / gearing really good, can't fault that, and it's also very smooth at all speeds. However, it doesn't run that great over points. On most points it will momentarily stop, and if it's going slow enough, sort of less than 50% speed, it's going to need a nudge to get over them. If this had a flywheel, that might not have been such a serious problem. Otherwise though, yeah, decent performance, so 4-star. The pulling power is admittedly the weakest I have on record, but then again it is the smallest Loco I have on record, so it figures. Around 0.02 newtons, very, very low tractive effort here. That's around 6 coaches on straight and level track, although do bear in mind that could be an overestimate because my measuring tools are really not designed for such light loads. But yeah, that gives you a rough idea. The mechanism is kind of middle of the road for me. It's okay in areas, not so much in others. I don't like the fact that there are no proper bearings on the driving axles. I think that's a shame. And the fact that no flywheel is here on the model, even though one was promised, is a real pity. Having said that, it's relatively easy to access the mechanism for servicing, although it could have been easier if the instructions had have detailed how to do that. And the motor in here does seem to be very high quality indeed. Very good motor, decent torque, can't fault that at all. So middle of the road, 3-star. The quality though, I think is 5-star. The weight is definitely not bad for a Loco of this size. It's got a very decently heavy die-cast chassis, and the build quality is high as well, with 0 visible glue, literally 0, no blips in the decoration, and everything assembled as it should be. So I'm not going to fault it on quality, I've given it 5-star. In terms of value though, I guess this is the most disappointing aspect of the model. When you compare it with other Locos available, this is just too expensive in my opinion. You can pay up to £95 for this, although I'm not entirely sure what the RRP is. I paid £79.09. I think for £80 a few more features would have been nice. A flywheel would have been great, cab detail and some proper bearings. I think really this should have had everything at that price, and decent as it is, I do think it just costs too much. So overall that is 7.12 out of 10, or a grade of D. Yeah, I think it's mainly let down by the combination of slightly poor quality mechanism and the very high price. So into the logbook we go then, and it is 28th place above the Rivarossi Big Boy and below the Triang Victorian train set. So right next to the other Rivarossi Loco that I reviewed recently, so at least Rivarossi are consistent. So there you have it then folks, that was my review of the Rivarossi Shunting Tractor. Yeah, like all models, there is good and bad in this model, and you should certainly consider those before making a purchase, but overall I think I can call this a very positive review. It's another very fascinating prototype, and it's one that I would never have believed could be made possible at HO scale, and yet here it is. So in that sense, it's very impressive, and the way that it works, you know, it works so well. That's also very impressive for its size. So what do you think? Do you think this is a decent model? Do you think it's the smallest Loco available in 00/HO scale? Are the Wickham trolleys smaller? Are they considered locomotives? I'm not sure. Maybe the Wickham trolley would steal the title, but then again, the Wickham trolley does cheat. I mean, it's got the motor in the trailer. The trolley itself is not powered. Maybe this is the smallest actual properly realistic powered vehicle. Not sure. But it's certainly pretty small, and it's certainly one of the oddest looking Locos I think I've ever bought. So I certainly don't regret it. I'm happy with it. And if you want one, sure, I could recommend it to you. But for now, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again very soon for yet another review. Alright, cheers everybody. You take care.